In this video, I want to show you how to refinish old hardwood floors. In this tutorial, I'm using some wood finish designed for floors, some sanding belts of varying grits. Typically you start out at 24 or 36 grit, and then a 60 grit, and then end with an 80 grit. Some protective equipment includes goggles, knee pads, and a respirator, as well as earplugs. Some general hand tools, pole sander, a paint roller with a 3/8 inch nap roller cover, a nylon or nylon polyester blend paintbrush, possibly a hand sander, a shop vac, and some wood filler with a spackle knife. For the first step, I'm going to make sure and remove all staples, screws, and nail heads from the floor. If there is previously carpet over this, you might have many of this, but you will have to get every single one out. Otherwise, this will tear up your sanding pads when you sand it. To remove the staples, you could use a fencing tool or just some pliers and just pull them out. It's fairly easy. The goal is to not allow the ends to stay in. Sometimes these will just pull off and the metal ends will stay stuck into the wood. For removing the screws, I would suggest using an impact driver versus a normal drill because there's a chance that the heads will snap off depending on how long these have been in the wood. If you're unable to get them out, it's best to just hammer them in past the surface of the wood. So I have a punch. I'm just going to put it directly on the head. Make sure it's centered and hammer squarely onto it. I'm just hammering in about 1/8 of an inch. I don't expect to sand that deep, but it needs to be further than what you expect to sand to because we're going to cover these up after we sand. Next step, remove all vents that extend out over the floor. Next step, do a thorough job sweeping the floor. Once you removed any vent coverage, you could then stuff them with the newspaper. This is just to keep the dust out. You don't want the dust getting in the HVAC system. Step, if you have really bad stains in the wood, this likely goes fairly deep, so consider replacing them. You don't actually have to use hardwood. You could use stock lengths and just cut them to size. It's fairly easy. Once the floors are prepped, it's time to turn off all fans and the HVAC system. Once everything is prepped and ready to go, if you don't have your own sander, at this point it's time to go rent one. Since time is money, once you start renting the actual machine, I'm going to lay out this practice piece ahead of time. This is so once I get back, I can immediately do a few test passes just to get used to the machine before putting it on the actual hardwood floors. Okay, here's the sander and the edger after renting it. Since I don't want to assemble it and then have to disassemble it to take it upstairs, I'm just going to take my practice piece upstairs and do my practice runs upstairs. You can see here, even though it's a straight line, the sander started lifting up right here, so I know that this is somewhat uneven. You can also see that there's unsanded portions in the corner here, and it's chattering a lot. So seeing this, I'm going to start doing diagonally and see how it goes. Okay, here's the master bedroom after doing the first rough cut with the drum sander as well as the edger. I've also done the small room. This is probably about 12 by 12, so pretty small. Done in here with the edger. So after doing the rough cut on these two rooms, I feel like I have enough experience where I'm not going to mess up. And I actually didn't make any mistakes, luckily enough. I want to go over some tips on how to sand the floor from the perspective of someone who has never done it. And hopefully you can not make any mistakes that I might have made and it'll go smoother for you. So as far as what grit to start with, we'll have to look at the floors and see if they've ever been sanded before or they are sort of warped from moisture or dryness or anything else in the air. In my case, my boards have never been refinished since they were installed about 45 years ago. So in this case, what happened, the corners right here and here were lower than the rest. So if I were to sand across this, I wouldn't be able to reach this area. So I had to sand diagonally first just to save a lot of time. Otherwise, I would have had to gone very slowly with the grain. If your boards look anything like this, you will definitely want to start diagonally instead of going with the grain. You'll go with the grain with the same grit after diagonally,
but it's much faster if you go diagonally to level out any minor imperfections or unlevelness right here. Also, I was able to start on 24 grit, no problems. I didn't have any issues with it eating too fast or faster than I could handle. I still had to go very slowly when I was going both diagonally and with the grain, so I had no issues there. I wouldn't worry about it too much versus a 36 grit. 36 grit would definitely take longer though. So to start off with, make sure your dust bag is empty and put on a new belt. This specifically is an expanding drum roller, so this just fits over a rubber drum, and once the centripetal force starts spinning it, it's able to hold on. So that's what holds this on. The other kind is a belt, so it'd be like if there was a slit right here, you wrap it around it and then you bolt it in place. They work just the same, so no difference there. This specific kind also raises and lowers the sandpaper like this. The other kind, you just pivot it like this. I would not suggest getting this kind. This has worn me out just because you have to quickly move it up at the end of a pass. It would be much easier if all you had to do was lift up and down. Also, when you're having to do this, you're having to control the sander with just one hand. So it really wears you out. Once the sander is set up, it's time to start sanding. So since my floors are in pretty bad shape, I'm going to start sanding diagonally first. What this means is that you're just going to move diagonally. You're going to start at the right. Again, these instructions say to start on the right and move to the left of a room. It has to do with the casters and where the drum is in relation to those casters. So I'm just going to follow the instructions on these. But you start at a corner and then move from right to left when you're making the diagonal cut. This only has you making one cut each pass, so you're not going forward and back. You're only going forward, moving over, and then going back. Since my floor is pretty bad, so I had to do passes going forward and back slowly, moving over 50%, overlapping the previous pass, going forward and back, and continuing the process until the room was done. If your floors are in pretty good shape, but you still need to do a diagonal cut, you could follow this method where you just do one direction, move over, go the other way, move over, and that would be much faster. So I'm going to demonstrate now doing the diagonal cut. This is a fairly square room, so I'm going to start in this corner right here and be moving this way. I'm going to be cutting at a 45-degree angle to show you. There will be big gaps because you're doing it at an angle, but I just get those later by going either with the grain or against the grain. As long as they're sanded eventually, then it's fine. First setup, I'm also going to make sure that the cord is out of the way. I'm going to be moving this way, so I want to make sure I don't run into the cord. So it's best to either put it on behind you or on this side so you're traveling away from it.
So here's a close-up of what I'm doing. I'm going to start the pass as soon as I can. Right here, I'm overlapping 50%. So the drum will be acting like right here. When I go forward, lift up at the last second, stop, start moving back, and then lower it. I'm going to be maintaining the same pass. I'm not moving over at all. Then I'm going to lift up when I end the pass. Then I'm going to move over. Again, this is because my floors are really bad, and this is just how much time I need to stay standing in order to get all the varnish off as well as leveling. If your floors are not bad, you can change it up. You might just need to go forward one pass, then you can move over, then go back another pass. It all depends on how bad your floor is. But here's a close-up of what I'm doing right now. You can see what the sander is taking away, and you can see the scratches in the wood. Here's a close-up of going diagonally. You can see that there's still some corners where it's not going fully. These will be taken out when I go with the grain, so I'm not too worried about it now. This is just a really rough cut to quickly level it. I don't know what it is. I think it's not adjusted correctly for the level. The casters are not adjusted, but I'm having to lift up on it right there. This causes the pivot, and it causes it to dig in more. If I don't, then there's spots where it doesn't dig in correctly. If you leave these and try to put a finish over here and it's not compatible with it, it'll peel up and it'll look horrible. Plus, if you leave it clear and you don't stain it, this will be very obvious through the finish. So I'm going to make sure and go over this probably with the edger and level this out. After going across the room in that direction diagonally, I still have all of this that I missed. So what I'm going to do now is just turn the sander around and finish going this way so I can get as much as possible and as close to the wall. Here's the room after doing the diagonal. You can see there's still quite a few areas where I can't get close enough. So what I'm going to do is have to go completely perpendicular to the grain to get as close to the wall as possible. Otherwise, I have to do this with the edger, which will take much longer. For the parts that are going with the grain, you could do this now, or you could just wait whenever you go with the grain for the next cut. So I'm just going to leave these for after I change the belt and then go with the grain for the whole room. So here's the floor after doing a full diagonal pass and then going completely crosswise where I couldn't reach along the grain. Again, I haven't even done these yet because I'm about to switch directions and go with the grain for the entire floor, so I'm going to get those done. So I just changed the belt on here. Even though this still looks good, there's a noticeable difference when you feel it compared to a new 24 grit. So you don't want to waste time using a worn out one. It's best just to replace it. So now that I've done a full diagonal of the room with the 24 grit, I'm going to go with the grain now with the same 24 grit to even out all of these diagonal scratches, which are very obvious. I'm still going to go forward and back without moving over. So I'm going to make 2 full passes before moving over 50%. If your floors are okay, you don't need to do this again. It just depends on how bad your floors are. So you could go forward 1 pass, move over 50%, go back 1 pass, move over 50% and go forward. The thing is, when I'm going with the grain, I'm going to split the room in half. So I'm going to go forward and back, and I'm going to end it right here. Reason being is that I need to blend it, but I can't get close to the wall because I'll run into it. So I'll get this out of the room when I turn the sander around and I can go up against the wall. When I get to my transition where I've already sanded, I'm going to overlap just a little bit. Another tip is when you end a pass right here, you could stagger these so you can end at different points. Then it'll blend easier when you do this half of the room because they'll be completely random and there won't be a pattern that you could see. I've done this half of the room. It's time to do this part. So all I need to do is turn the sander around and then I can get right up to the wall and then start heading this way through the room. First, I'm going to sweep all the coarse dust that's on this side though, just so I can see where I'm working. It makes it easier to see where the diagonals are compared to where I've already sanded with the grain. Room after doing a full pass with the grain. We got as close as I can to the wall to avoid having to spend so much time using the edger. Done. I'm going to get all the equipment out of the room and bring the edger in.
Okay, so one thing I learned as far as edging, it's better to probably take the shoe molding off if you have any. It just makes it easier to get the edger up to the wall. You don't have to angle it like I do because it wears you out. It's not required. You could get pretty close enough where you won't be able to tell the difference in the transition. It would have taken the same amount of time removing the trim and then having to put it back as I did just pushing it up against there and making sure it got to the edge. But I wore myself out doing it, so I would suggest moving the shoe molding.
For edging, you need to have the same grit on the sander as you did as a drum roller. I just did a 24 grit, so now I'm going to use a 24 grit on the edger. I didn't see any difference in how I sanded as far as the motion. I tried forward and back as well as side to side, and it didn't seem to make that big of a difference. It was easier to do a circular motion just because that's the way it was spinning and it tended to move itself. To get up to the direct edge of the molding, I tilted the edger and moved into it. I'd lift it up slightly, but it was able to get up to less than a 16th of an inch to the edge. I would not suggest doing this just because it wore me out, and I would suggest removing the shoe molding, sanding up to it like normal without tilting, and then just putting the shoe molding back. The only reason I didn't do this is the shoe molding is very old and it's very brittle, and I would have broken it more than likely.
So I'm going to demonstrate a few passes and showing you what worked for me now. Also, I just want to note that this is a rubber bumper. This part's not actually spinning. The disc is inset to it, so you can't touch the disc to the wall at all. You always hit this rubber bumper first.